This video is going to be our guide on the Human Torch inside Marvel Rivals. We waited a little bit of time to see what his playstyle is actually like. Starting off with the basics, and then we'll get on into some additional tips after that. So his primary attack is essentially a shotgun blast. So as you can see here, you're dealing basically damage with 7 shots per round. So it's going to be 7 kind of pellets you're firing. Now the damage does fall off at 15 meters. So once you're past 15 meters, then you're dealing less damage, but you do still get critical hits. And as you can see, you're dealing a solid amount of damage because landing critical hits is very easy with this attack. Next up, we have the Blazing Blast. Now the way this works is that you deal 40 damage on impact, and then it does 25 damage per second on tick damage. So as you can see here, it's taking out a good portion of that enemy player's health. And that is if you land a direct hit. Next up, we have what's called the Pyro Prison. Now the Pyro Prison is basically connecting all of these attacks together. And anyone inside this is going to take additional damage. As you can see, that damage rate is ridiculously fast. So the way that works essentially is it's 50 damage a second if you're inside the triangle or square or whatever it is you decide to make. It's essentially 50 damage a second inside there. And if you're on the line, you take 60 damage. So if anyone tries to walk outside of the Pyro Prison, they're going to take 60 base damage. Now his next ability is the Flaming Meteor. Now this is basically a dive attack that pushes enemies back. Now the amount of damage this does is not too important. It deals 40 damage, but the knockback is the most important thing here. And this is very useful for displacing enemies out of position, whether you're trying to knock them off the map, whether you're trying to basically push them out of a position, whatever it may be, it's very useful. But the way you actually want to use this is by using the Blazing Blast with it. Now, what that means is you get an additional 55 damage for exploding the Blazing Blast on the enemy. Its final ability is the Plasma Body, which allows him to kind of fly faster. This one's pretty standard. There's nothing really too much to this whatsoever. Basically, just allows you to get around a little bit quicker. So his ultimate actually works in 2 parts. So as you can see here, first of all, it does a spell field damage of 70, so the enemies then take damage. Then he can also turn his tornadoes on as well, which is basically the same as his Blazing Blast. So that's the same as this attack right here. But essentially now it's a tornado that instead of dealing 25 damage, it deals 100 damage per tornado, which is a massive boost in damage. And you can have up to 4 of these active at a time. So as you can see here, you can have 4 tornadoes going, which is basically dealing 400 damage in one set location. Getting on into the additional tips and the combos section. So first of all, when it comes to his primary attack, at super far away, as you can see, the spread is so large. Now we are landing some critical hits in here, but the spread is just so big at that range. Now you actually want to be at medium range of Human Torch, and you don't want to be too far away from the enemy either, because basically, as you can see here, if you actually land some headshots, you can get basically 2 hits on most squishy characters. So because his attack is like a shotgun, you kind of do want to stay within shotgun range essentially with this guy. The next tip is his combos, and these work very well at range. So there's a few of them, and we'll go over his best one first. So the best one that he has, especially on a single target, is you want to use 2 Blazing Blasts, and then you want to basically dive onto them, and that's going to be an insta-kill. That is pretty rapid for a flying hero to kill that quick. As you can see, the radius is pretty big here, so even if you don't land it directly, so let's say you're doing it in the middle of 2 enemies, you can still get insta kills on 2 enemies, which is pretty insane. Now the next one that's good is if you want to keep your distance. So you do the Blazing Blast and then you fire your primary fire after that. Now the Blazing Blast is going to do enough damage, and then your primary fire is obviously going to kind of finish them off. But this is good if you want to kind of just stay at range and you don't want to be too close, because there's no way you're dealing that much damage with your primary fire alone. Now the other combo that I think is absolutely insane for the Human Torch is essentially this. So this is the Pyro Prison, and basically you want to activate that once the enemies are taking damage, and once you've got a good amount of damage, then activate your ultimate and then just basically go crazy with it afterwards. So that is something I do think works extremely well, because you're dealing so much damage in this period of time. So it's worth saving your Pyro Prison to then basically use your ultimate straight after that, so you're dealing so much damage over a long period of time. Now something that's really important about this Pyro Prison is that if anything breaks these lines by any means necessary whatsoever, Nothing's going to take damage inside it. Now, they will still take damage on the line itself, but nothing inside will take damage because the line has been broken. So it needs to be a continuous connection. So like I said, if you try and connect it behind this wall or whatever, nothing that's going to be in this kind of triangle is going to take that additional damage unless it's a clear line of sight between each line that you're connecting. So at this point, then because they're connected perfectly, then the damage is taken quicker inside. Let's get into the gameplay portion now, and we're going to give you some additional tips on how to play Human Torch. So first of all, you do need to be within that medium range, like I mentioned, because getting that maximum damage potential out of your primary attack is going to help you a ton on getting kills. He is a duelist at the end of the day, so you will want those kills, and that shotgun blast is most effective at as close as you could possibly be. Now, you don't want to be like obviously up in an enemy's face because you don't have the movement capabilities to deal with that. But what you do have is a really powerful attack that can take out enemies very quickly. So try and stay within that medium range and use your combos well, and you're going to be dealing tons of damage to enemy players. Now, obviously objectives make sense to play on when it comes to domination. You can basically essentially just mimic the domination square, and anything inside that is going to take so much damage when you use your pyro prison. So that is one way to do it, and probably the most effective way to use it. But you can also use it on choke points as well, and I think this is extremely effective, especially on convoy game modes. If there's a kind of tunnel or a choke, you do want to set up your pyro prison to deal damage to enemies passing through it, because not every enemy can sit and flank you, because then it's not a flank anymore, then the enemies are just repositioned altogether. But 90% of the time, most people will be sitting on the convoy trying to move it forward, and then you set up your pyro prison and deal tons of damage that way. So his pyro prison is extremely strong. It's a bit inconsistent at times in terms of you're trying to make the shape that you want and then it doesn't really work out, but that's a whole separate issue. I think that's maybe down to do with the game itself, but also just a bit of a skill gap to understand where you can and cannot put your blasts to then actually connect them up properly to deal damage. Then we also have his ultimate. I do want to quickly mention as well, people don't know that the ultimate actually allows you to take 30% less damage. So it is kind of like a defensive ultimate to some extent, not fully, but its ultimate is not that powerful on its own. And I think they did that on purpose because obviously they have the Storm team up, which is pretty strong, by the way. You can basically guarantee a team wipe with that thing. The last tip I want to give you with the Human Torch is don't underestimate the power of his dive attack. I think this is the best counter to the Human Torch's counters, if that makes any sort of sense. So if you have a Hela that's trying to snipe you at the sky, which is obviously a flying hero counter, or a Adam Warlock, or even an Iron Fist, or even a Scarlet Witch, then this dive ability is super important. So against like a Hela, for example, obviously you just want to dive straight on top of them. As soon as enemies come near them, they can't really do much because their best range is obviously at long range because of hit scan heroes. Now, obviously, they can fly away and move out of position, but obviously then you've done your job at that point. But also, when it comes to heroes like Iron Fist or Scarlet Witch, who are going to essentially chase you, then what you can do is draw them out as far as you can without taking too much damage, away from their enemy team, essentially, and then just dive straight back into the fight. And that way, you've kind of positioned them away from you, but you don't need to actually try and kill them with this attack. What you need to try and do is just get them away from the fight, then you dive straight back into the fight at a pretty quick speed, and you can do this at any height. And this is one of the best things that the Human Torch has that the other flying heroes don't have. I think this is probably one of the best abilities that he does actually make use of extremely well. So if you enjoyed this video and you learned something new, don't forget to subscribe, and thank you very much for watching.